All right now. Order. Order, please. Welcome to tonight's regular meeting of the whole. Let's call this meeting open at 8 p.m. Fine. Let's go on to the adoption of the agenda, please. Councillor Zant, I move that the agenda be adopted as presented. Seconded by Councillor Bouchard. All those in favor? Carried. No changes then? That's fine. Disclosures of pecuniary interests? None. Delegations or presentations? None. That's fine. Is there a delegation present here tonight? Mr. The Conservation Authority? Well, the gentleman is here for you, Monsieur Boucher. Petition and correspondence 5.1, City of Kitchener's resolution regarding consumer packaging on single-use wipes. Yes. To support, I hope? Yes. I spoke to Mr. Cormier, and he told me that that was one of their biggest problems we do face, pollution-wise. Go ahead. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council supports the motion of the City of Kitchener asking that the government review consumer packaging on single-use wipes and to prevent these articles from being flushed in the toilet system of cities and elsewhere. Fine, let's go on to the adoption of the agenda, by the way. We have the Space Builder people that are here, so we can possibly displace item 9.5 so that may be heard at 9.1 instead of 9.5. If you don't mind, just to accommodate these folks, let's go on now to item 5.2, Mr. Lalonde. Well, there are no resolutions. It's simply a request to proclaim Waste Reduction Week. Do I need someone to second that we proclaim this week Waste Reduction Week? 6.1, Mr. Levert, please. Notices of motion now. Councillor Levert? Well, this is a notice of motion, Mr. Mayor. Be it resolved that the Council, hold on a minute, yes, notice of motion presented by Councillor Michel Levert and supported by Mayor Guy Desjardins to support Mr. Alain Lalonde's application to obtain a license to sell LCBO products in a convenience store located at 3150 Gendron Road. Be it resolved that the Council of the City of Clarence and Rochlin hereby support Mr. Alain Lalonde's application to obtain a license to sell LCBO products in a section of its convenience store located within the limits of the City of Clarence Rochlin, more specifically at 3150 Gendron Road in Hammond. Any questions as to this? All those in favor then? Carried. Thank you, folks. Let's go on to item 8, the United Counties of Prescott-Russell report. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago in Ottawa dealing with the flooding situation. Mr. Citizen, Mr. Watson was in attendance. All Ottawa City Councillors were in attendance also. And we had occasion to engage in a conversation with a Manitoba-based gentleman who was hired by the province, who told us that the Outaouais River water basin is the size of the fair country of England, a sizable surface. There'll be a report issued in October. Now, I suggest that if the province helped out by helping people flooded out by giving them $50,000 to help them to either shore up the house or to move the house in an area where it would be out of danger from potential flooding. But that's all going to be included in the specialist report forwarded to us in October. Also, I attended the Larose Forest Committee today that I'm part and parcel of. Don't be astonished, this winter if many big pines that you see on County Road number 8 south of Bourget be cut down, there's a reason. Behind this, there's red pine disease right now, and if one falls prey to this disease, we've seen that some trees die, and when one tree dies, it impacts 16 surrounding trees. These trees are all at mature height, and that's one of the best sources of income that Forêt La Rose or the La Rose Forest has at present. They're used to make telephone poles, and that's why they'll cut them down before they become useless, if you wish, or telegraph poles. Is that what you were going to say, Mr. Mayor? Well, maybe there are still some telegraph poles existing somewhere. We don't know. Well, Mr. Mayor, I thought for sure you were. There are still some telephone poles, but they make use of those for telephone poles, but they will be cut down. And let's make sure that the money, the income that stems from the cutting of those trees. Now, the United Counties has purchased these past 5 to 8 years close to 400 to 500 acres worth of property. And when a property comes up for sale, the counties purchase those, and trees are springing up, new trees are springing up from those properties that have been purchased. So, and it's mandatory to cut those sick pines down. There's nothing more to do than to. Let's go on to surplus property on Claudette Street. It's 9.1. Oh, let's go on to 9.5 immediately then, shall we? 9.5, yes? Fine. Yes, I eliminated some subjects today. Whereas growth-related infrastructure must be constructed to support the Morris Village Phase 5 development, and whereas, Mr. Mayor, this infrastructure also provides service capacity for future Burgil development adjacent to Poupals Road and external lands west of Canon Street, and whereas landowners that benefit from the servicing works constructed for Morris Village Phase 5 will be required to pay their share. Be it resolved that Council hereby approves option 3 as described in report number INF 2019-006 entitled No City Front-End Financing, which consists of ensuring that once the development proceeds for Burgil and external lands, the developers will be requested to pay their share of benefiting servicing costs and applicable interest charges as a condition of subdivision approval, and Space Builders enters into front-end financing agreement with the city as condition of subdivision approval. Seconded by Councillor Lalonde. Any questions? Councillor Lalonde. I'm going to revert to English because I have a question of Mr. Dart, Chair.
The whole process of how that will work, because this is how we've generally approached development in the city. I concur that I agree with the recommendation. It's just that we also have to take into consideration that that company is going to be investing a little over $50 million into our community over the next little while. So as a group, I think we need to make sure that the decisions we make, short, medium, and long term, taxation, DC charge, and all of that, does not put into jeopardy that kind of a huge investment into our municipality, because they are taking a big risk, and it's a calculated risk, mind you, but there's a lot of players involved, and I think we need to respect that as a council.
Also, though, I think we also have large bills coming in. Mm-hmm. We discussed one tonight. Yep. So it's something we have to be careful also.
Yeah, but if there's no development because we're putting all the load on the developer without any option of helping out or doing something for them, well, then we won't get any revenue for the big project. So I think it's a fine balance. I know the administration had meeting with the company. I just want to make sure that if there's any doubt in any of us that we would need more information, that we take the time maybe to sit down with the administration. Like, this is a pretty big decision.
Tonight is an information so that
okay,
you know what's going on. Mm-hmm. I didn't want this whole project to keep going and you not informed.
because it impacts many future developments. And I just want to make sure that we do our very best to be as welcoming as possible to those companies coming in. And if we put all the load on them, and I know it's an approach, will we slow down what's going on versus, and then we have new DCs coming up, there's increase in there too. So we're putting the front end load a lot on the companies, and I just want us to remain open that if at one point they hit a stumbling block, that we're able to create an environment where they can keep going and keep having the momentum. I believe we have an extremely good momentum this year.
No, totally agree.
And I wouldn't want a decision by council to slow anything down. On the opposite, we want to make sure that we support the developers within reason.
Mr. Darch?
Yeah, maybe just a few comments is that I have to extend my appreciation to Space Builders and the other major developers. We tried to work on this. We want to be proactive in terms of seeing development happen, but there is a consideration. You have to look at future developments and what impact that your decision here will have on those, because you know whatever you do here is going to be looked at and it's going to be followed by others. But one of the things, the important parts that's in the report, and maybe it's gotten buried somewhat, I think there's a lot of land holdings along the Carroll corridor, and maybe a few others there. From what I've heard, and this is all sort of third hand, I think there's some misconceptions about which direction they can go in servicing. There's some misconceptions about getting a free ride. And one of the things that I think we, the administration, need to do here is we need to meet with them before the end of the year. We've got a listing that was provided by Space Builder staff, and we're going to look at that. And I think we need to meet with them and talk to them about it and sort of, you know, map out the way it's going to be. So if development takes place with Space Builders, and I know there's Brazil development in there, if that whole momentum takes place, then maybe some of these other players should be coming on board and will be interested in coming on board, in which case payback, you know, if council and ultimately adopts a recommendation, payback for future servicing may be accelerated. But I'm just concerned there's different feelings out there in the development community about, you know, what we're going to ask for. The dividing line has been set in terms of, there's a map in there, but everything west of Carron goes into the Space Builders area. So all of the lands that are tributary to that are going to have to pay for their fair share of the infrastructure that's in place. It really comes down, the report, it's a matter of risk. I hate to put it that way, but that's what it is. You know, who takes that financial risk?
Because I don't think
I gave you 5 options.
It's not Space Builder, it's not Brazil, but it's the other dark side that we're not sure about. How,
Yeah.
when is it going to develop?
Well,
will it develop? Are we stuck with a bill?
Right
after?
now, whoever develops first, in this occurrence, we
Yeah,
have
the
a
first-
stage
yeah,
that's
yeah.
going. They have to assume the whole cost until the other company decides to develop. So
Yeah.
they're getting the full load of something that if the other company decides not to develop, well, how long will they have to sustain
Yeah.
that?
They- they-
And that's something, at the end, it's the home buyer that's gonna, because,
Yeah.
you know, it has to be passed somewhere.
Yeah.
They can most likely front end it by stage.
Yeah.
But after that, if the other company doesn't develop,
Yeah.
well, you have a private company sustaining something that's supposed to develop. That is, we don't know the future of
Yeah.
really Brazil because they haven't put a shovel on the ground yet.
I mean, there's one table in the report where you raised an interesting point about staging. Because that was one of the things we said, okay, when does a certain amount of infrastructure have to go in? But, you know, in that table, you know, you look at that 4.2, there's a fair cost that's going to get incurred. I mean, it goes to 2026 at the outset, but there's still a fair cost that has to be front-ended here. So we've taken all this into consideration, but it's who's going to bear the risk?
But like I said, this is information. Bring more facts for you. Tonight you've got the information. What should I know?
And to Mr. Darch's point is as if you do something for some developers, then
I agree with you.
everybody else is. I mean, I personally have something, a project here that is not nowhere near the size, but I mean, the same implications are there. And when I discussed the matter with Mr. Lenhart and I think Mr. Mayor as well, I mean, they were of the same vision as your report, Mr. Darch, is that, well, you know, development should pay for development.
True.
So it is a tricky balance to make.
But maybe your developer doesn't have to develop or put infrastructure to prepare a second company to come in, and that's where I think there is somewhat of a line.
Yeah, it's
As long as both companies talk together with the administration, that we can have a firm confidence that the second company is gonna come in when they say they're gonna come in, so they can participate.
But it's not just the second company.
I know, but there's one bigger one that
Yeah,
does that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Just Collier?
But it's the external lands, which is roughly $6-7 million worth of infrastructure, you know, that's, and you just don't, they're so fragmented along Caron, you just don't know when they're gonna come on, so I think the city has a role to play in terms of meeting with them and just making sure it's clearly understood about which way the service has gotta go and no free ride.
So maybe we should get those meetings going and then report back to council again. Madam Collier?
So this is one of the first times that the city is actually facing this situation, which is why we wanted to get it before council, to understand the concept of sharing the risk between the city and a developer. In most of the other developments that have gone on, there's been some risk taken on behalf of other developments by a developer, but this is a fairly large magnitude, and we need to stand back and have a look at what risk we want to take for that. And because there's that unknown group of properties, or 6 or 7 properties that were going to be serviced by this, there needed to be some thought put around, and because we don't know those companies and that's what Mr. Darch is referring to, that we'll meet with them. Brazil has been in discussions with us as we have met with the space builders at the same time. And there seems to be less risk on the Brazil side as there might be with the other companies that are unknown entities. It's the size of the money is what has brought this to the administration's attention. Space Builders approached us and asked us if we could bring it to council for discussion and consideration. And here's where we are tonight.
Okay, what to say?
Because it's not an information, Mr. Mayor. We're asked to vote on an option tonight. So it's more than an information. We have to make a decision.
You can defer it
Well,
if you want more time.
I,
I personally would like a little bit more time.
Me
I'd like
too,
to solve
because-
For people to get clarification
Yeah.
on something that I don't want to discuss right now.
and
Okay, so deferred.
Well, it's just an option.
Can-
I would-
Well,
and can we also ask that they communicate directly right now with the other partners that are not?
Well, I think that's the intention of Mr. Darch, to contact the other companies that own that other land that we're not sure about, to inform them that there's only one way they can go with
Yeah.
their lines. They can't go one side and decide, well, I'll go on the other side later on. There's only one way to go. It'll be west side, east side. So that's all the information we can get later on if we decide to defer and wait for that information to come back.
So are we just direct the administration just to do like advise them right away to talk to the other
Yeah.
instead of this?
Yeah, so to see if they're on board or not, because there's a good amount of money that's gonna be involved in supplying those pieces of land. So if they're not gonna be involved, well, I guess we'll have to take a decision what's to be done there. But we can let Mr. Darch meet with these people and see what happens. Mr. Caldani?
Can we still not move forward with this option and then have that, like, there's no ways around it. They need to know no matter what. So if we tell them now and defer this later or take a decision now, our idea of this isn't gonna change. It's gonna be east-west. There's no free.
The
you know what I
east-west,
mean?
yeah, that's the decision. They're not going, the people on the west side of Caron can't go on the east side. So that's firm. It's just a question of knowing if they're gonna be on board or not. So that's why Mr. Darch would meet with them to figure out if they're on board and they're gonna pay their share.
And they may have,
Mr. Darch, did I forget something, or?
Well, I guess we've given you a lot of numbers in here. I'm not so sure this report is about numbers, it's about the principle. You know, whether it's, you know, we're showing about $6 million in terms of front-end financing for the external lands. What happens if it's 3 million? The same principle applies, I think, and that's what I was trying to get at on this report. A lot of it's driven by the numbers, but I think the snowballing effect is if we start to take on part of the financial risk of placement of infrastructure, you will get similar requests from others. And I guess I'd be hard pressed to say how we would say no. And the impact is really, a lot of this will be done on debt financing. So it's gonna, maybe Fred can speak to this better than I can, but it's certainly gonna have an impact on your debt ratio capacity.
So I think by deferring it tonight, come back with it later, it gives us time to get information from the other owners, and at the same time, we can sort of see if there's another solution. But I don't think Mr. Gert, I don't think it's, you really need an answer tonight, and we can wait, go through all this process. Okay?
All right, all those in favor that it's deferred? Are we giving a directive of some sort? Well, Mr. Darch will be entering into consultation. So let's go on now to item 9.1, surplus property, dealing with the 1954 Claudette property. Mr. Cardarelli, please. Whereas Bylaw 2004-153 provides the procedures for disposing of surplus property. And whereas further to a consultation with all department heads, the administration recommends that the property known as 1954 Claudette Drive be declared surplus to the needs of the city. Be it resolved that Council hereby declares the property known as 1954 Claudette Drive to be surplus to the needs of the city, and be it further resolved that Council hereby authorizes the clerk and or the treasurer to proceed to the sale of the surplus property identified as 1954 Claudette Drive as per the policy adopted under Bylaw 2004-153. Seconded by Councillor Grimard. Any questions? All those in favor then? Carried. Let's go on to item 9.2, Poupart Road Safety Assessment. Councillor Zant. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approves the installation of additional warning signs as recommended in Report INF 2019-27, seconded by Councillor Bouchard. Questions? Is additional signage the only solution? I know that a resident of that particular area told us that there were some problems with regard to the shoulders of this roadway. Well, this gentleman that wound up in the ditch was pressed for time. There was another individual with flashing red lights that was following him along. I just want to make sure that that's the sole thing that we're doing with regards to Poupart right now. Yes, all those in favor? Carried. Let's go on to item 9.3, the Energy Conservation Plan update. Councillor Guimard. Whereas, as per the Electricity Act of 1998, the city is required to update its energy conservation plan every 5 years. Be it resolved that Municipal Council approves the update of the 2019 to 2024 Energy Conservation Plan written by J.L. Richards and dated August 28, 2019, as recommended in report number LOI 2019-09-03. Seconded by Councillor Boucher. Well, I'm in agreement with the report. Mr. Mayor, with regard to the energy conservation plan, is that we forwarded the draft plan of the energy conservation plan for the city, and I'm going to invite this individual from J.L. Richards to proceed to a short presentation of the plan itself. The presentation will be made in English, and if you have any questions, go ahead. Feel free to do so. Feel free to ask any questions you might ask. You might feel warranted to be asked.
As mentioned, I'm engineer with Joe Richards and Associates, and we were retained by the City of Toronto to update their energy conservation and management plan. I'll provide a quick overview of this plan, and I've told multiple times to be brief, so I will try to keep it as brief as I can. The city's plan was first prepared in 2014, and as mentioned, as a part of the Electricity Act, it needs to be updated every 5 years, mandated by the province.
Monsieur Cousineau, we seem to have a problem. Pierre's going to try and fix that.
Is it? Plug into that. There we go. It's not you.
Thanks, Alan. Good job, Monsieur Boucher.
So this will be a brief overview of the plan. The printed plan that's distributed has much more details, and I encourage the council to review the printed plan. So the cost of energy in Ontario is increasing. Ontario's 2017 long-term energy plan predicted a 20% increase in electricity over the next 4 years. And the federal carbon tax, which came into effect in Ontario, is going to cause an increase in natural gas costs by 80% by 2022. So with these two factors in place, municipalities need to manage their energy in order to manage their operating costs. Any plan needs a benchmark as a starting point. The previous plan used the total energy consumption for the municipality. We advised against this in the update because anytime the municipality would add a new building to its stock, their energy would go up regardless of how efficient that building was. Even, for example, if the municipality was to construct a net zero building, they would not get the full benefit of that innovative achievement by only considering the total energy consumption. So what we recommended for this plan and what has been used in this plan for targets is energy use intensity. That's taking the energy consumed by a facility and weighing against a common metric for that facility. So for many of the administrative buildings, it is the total gross area, floor area of the building that energy is weighted against. And for water and wastewater treatment plants, it's measured against the flow through that facility. Previous measures that have been undertaken, the city has undergone a lot of LED upgrades through the different programs that were available through the province over the past few years. And there's also been some significant fuel switching from heating oil to natural gas for many of the city's facilities. Currently, the city has no renewable energy generation. So this slide just provides a brief overview of the energy consumption and emissions over the past 4 years. Total energy consumption has decreased since 2012. Increased since 2012. This is largely due to additional facilities being built, purchased, or leased by the city. The decrease in greenhouse gas emissions is associated with the greening of the Ontario grid and the shutdown of various coal plants that have made electricity less reliant on greenhouse gas emissions. Electricity is still the single largest source of energy for the city, but natural gas share increases as fuel switching from electric heat and fuel oil at some facilities continues. 4 buildings consume more than half of the city's total energy consumption: the water treatment plant, wastewater treatment plant, the Clarence Creek Arena, and the Jean-Marc Lalonde Arena.
Can I, sorry to interrupt, I just want to ask a question while you're on it. Clarence Creek Arena actually runs as a full functional arena. Has, you know, ice and we changed the lights.
And a recreational hall.
And a recreation. The Jean-Marc Lalonde Arena has 0 ice and is at 697 kilowatts? 697,000. And even though we do not operate or manage the Clarence Rockland Arena, that has 2 pads, and that's not even on this report. Why wouldn't the Clarence Rockland Arena be on here if it's a building that we own?
It's not a building that we run, so we don't pay the hydro bills at that arena.
No, but it's still one of our buildings.
It's under contract.
But it's still one of our buildings. I'm not
So
trying to throw shade on your report, I'm just trying to figure this out. But to go back to my normal question, how does an arena that actually have ice is almost the same as an arena that does not?
That is very suspect, and that is one of the recommendations from this report, was to look further into those arenas to figure out why there is such a large energy consumption. It is outside of the scope of this report, but is one of the major recommendations to take a harder look at those arenas.
That's insane.
But that's why we got this report, so we got.
No, and I appreciate it. I was just kind of stunned when I saw that. But that's incredible.
It's common for most municipalities, especially small municipalities, that those are their largest energy consumers, are treatment plants and then arenas, in that order. But it is surprising, the energy consumption at that arena if the ice pad has been removed.
Well, even the natural gas is like 3 9.
Yeah. Anyways, sorry to interrupt. I just want some clarification.
And to answer your other question about facilities that the municipality doesn't pay the hydro bills for, that the requirements of this plan from the province, anything that the municipality is not responsible for the utility bills doesn't have to fall into this plan. But that could always be in a future plan to widen the scope of the plan to include other buildings within the municipality.
Gives us a clearer picture of really what our consumption is, especially in a building that we own, partly own, or fully own.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, we own it. So, thank you.
So on this slide, it breaks down each of the individual buildings. The green bar represents the energy use intensity in 2014. The purple bar represents it in 2018. And orange is the Energy Star national median for the country. You can see there is some of the arenas and some of the municipal facilities do have a higher energy use intensity than the national median. And both of the plants are also higher than the national median. So energy management practices are usually measured in 8 areas with 5 levels. So 5 represents something that has been well established, and 0 is something that is not present. And for the 2014 plan, the city staff conducted a self-assessment of the town's practice areas. That you can see on the slide in the dark blue. The light blue line is the reassessment that the staff had conducted for this 2019 update. And the arrows show the 2024 objectives that this plan hopes to move the energy practices into. For the 2019 self-assessment, commitment, planning, and organization has all increased. The 2014 plan established the City of Clarence Rockland Energy Management Policy. This plan provides updates to the objectives and targets that were established in the 2014 plan. The objectives are for the projects area to improve capacity to identify and develop energy efficiency opportunities, specifically in the context of scheduled capital renewal. The communication objective is to reach a level where energy efficiency is promoted informally throughout the city's communications. For training is to have one city staff receive training in energy efficiency management practices. And the individual targets are based on energy use intensity using 2012 as a benchmark year. So for the 2024 plan for facilities is to bring it back to 2012 levels. As I mentioned earlier, those levels have increased. And by 2029 to see a 4% reduction compared to 2012. For the wastewater and water treatment plants to have a reduction of 20% compared to 2012 levels by 2024. And for 2029 to reach a 25% reduction. For street lighting in both areas, it's to maintain the current level of street lighting that has been enacted through the city's street lighting policy. So in order to reach these targets, various energy efficiency initiatives were identified. 7 specific ones for specific buildings resulted in over 1,000 megawatt hours equivalent of energy saved, which translates into 136,000 in annual building savings, which represents 56 tons of greenhouse gas reductions. They range in payback from 1 to 8 years and can be as simple as installing programmable thermostats or reinstalling or recommissioning programmable thermostats to complex projects like energy optimization study at the water treatment plant. There's also general energy initiatives that aren't specific to any building but take a broader approach, such as conducting energy audits of all the major accounts, specifically ones that are higher than national medians, setting up energy monitoring tools at big users to understand where the energy is being consumed, establishing a revolving green fund as a structure to pay for future energy efficiency projects, hiring or contracting an energy manager to manage the city's energy consumption, and conducting a solar photovoltaic assessment of the city's facilities. Both the arenas, as big open roofs, have great potential for rooftop solar systems, and there's various funding programs that can support these initiatives through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the IESO, Enbridge, or third-party co-op financers such as Co-Energy. All these values that are on the slide do not include the rising cost of energy or financial incentives or fundings that's available. So the payback can actually be decreased when those are factored in. The expected impact of this plan and the plan for review. This graph shows the historical energy use intensity for all the facilities and the plants, and the projected if these energy efficiency initiatives are enacted. The red dot is the targets for 2024. If all of the energy efficiency initiatives detailed in this plan are enacted, the city will be able to meet its targets. So the targets are based on the previous plan and they're achievable, but steps will need to be taken to ensure that they can be met. The plan to improve energy management practices is going to focus on projects, communication, and training. And 4 of the largest accounts make up more than half of the energy consumption for the municipality's facilities. Many of them have higher energy use intensities than the national median, and further investigation into these specific facilities is highly recommended. The payback calculations that are presented in this plan are based on 2019 energy cost and do not factor in escalating electricity or natural gas prices or financing and incentives that are available through various utility programs. These could result in shorter paybacks when they're factored in. So throughout this process, the City of Clarence-Rockland staff provided great support to JLR and was respectful in our efforts to updating this plan, working with staff in hand. JLR's energy team is pleased to discuss a comprehensive energy conservation project strategy with council and staff. Are there any other questions?
In a lot of the energy studies that you do, our recommendations for new renewable energy sources, are you mostly stuck on solar? Is that mostly what's being said? Because I read a lot on the subject, and a lot of what is usually being talked about is about combining different things. Like if you want to go solar, okay, you want to bring that in, but at the same time you'd want to be using power packs or whatnot, so that you're also filling those as well. So if you're in a in the water treatment plant, well, if you do want to have solar, but you need to find a way to you're able to store more as well, especially considering the way that electricity in Ontario is made versus day usage versus night usage, during the day using energy from power packs or whatnot. Other cities have been creative. In Portland, they do the whole turbines in the water treatment from the river, water coming in, so through those power pipes that they call them, they'll use electricity through the turbines there. Same thing, the water coming out of the treatment. So there's a lot of little creative things going around there. So that's the only thing that I didn't see in the report, was more creativity as to what else is out there, what other municipalities are doing, versus just saying, well, you could have solar out there and change your thermostats, which are good to know. I think the report does a really good snapshot of where we are right now. Really questioning the Jean-Marc Lalonde Arena with the numbers we have there, because they make no sense. So it's questionable. But I like the snapshot that we're getting from it and the small things that we can do. But I think I'd also be interested in seeing, okay, so what are the bigger scopes that we can do from a complete strategy versus just add-ons at the same time. So I don't know what you're seeing out there and what's being done around.
So we usually recommend solar assessments because they're the simplest ones to undertake. They're the easiest to retrofit on an existing building, and from kind of a regulatory framework, there's the least amount of approvals that are required. If you're looking at renewable energy like a big wind farm, there's a lot of other environmental assessments and approvals that need to go through. If you're looking at geothermal capture for facilities, it's really tied to what the heating load is for those facilities, and there is also other regulatory approvals you need to go anytime you're taking water or more in-depth thorough assessments. So those are all options that are available, and we do regularly work with municipalities and private clients to assess those different options. It wasn't included in this report because they are more complex and there's a lot more upfront cost and investigation that needs to go into it. Kind of typical solar assessments are inexpensive when compared to drilling to bring out groundwater to test for geothermal systems.
And the use of power packs, as like Tesla is going on a rampage with those right now. I mean, there's a lot because they can be combined, they can be expanded and whatnot. And it's obviously with a company like Tesla, it's high. It's high-end technology that they're developing. Is that because I mean it's the whole idea of combining, right? So if you're going to go out and get more energy, well, how are you going to store it also as well, or can you go and store it and be able to use more of it?
So in Ontario, there is a net metering program that is set up that if you do generate on-site renewable electricity, even if you're not using it at the time that it's generated, you can. It's not sell back to the grid, but you store it onto the grid as a credit. And then later on at night, if you're using more energy, then you can take it back and it's balanced out on a monthly bill. You can even roll these credits forward for up to a year. So that you can do that with any type of renewable energy. For any type of battery storage or energy storage systems, what we've seen in Ontario where it starts to make sense is very large industrial users that are Class A customers. The city doesn't have any facilities that are in that class of customers. Okay. So it is an option that's out there, but our assessments, it hasn't been, the financial payback hasn't been there to go on batteries alone. There is options if you're looking at putting in batteries instead of a generator, but there's life safety requirements that sometimes don't allow a large battery system to be put in place of a generator. So we have seen it in areas where it makes sense, but it's usually been for very large industrial and manufacturing facilities at this point. And at this point in Ontario's rate structure, that can change at any time, and then it can always be reassessed at that point.
Thank you. Autre question? Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Item 9.4, Cyber Security Strategic Plan. Mr. Cardarelli. All right. This is the department's recommendation, Mr. Mayor. Yes. Oh, all those in favor of energy conservation, by the way, fine. Second, I would like, Mr. Mayor, for us to take this into consideration, especially when we're going to be entering into budgetary talks. The Jean-Marc Lalonde Arena is a major energy consumer. Well, I think that we should certainly take a strong look at this study when comes time for the next round of budgetary talks. Let's go on now to cybersecurity. Mr. Cardarelli, item 9.4. It's still not Christmas, Mr. Mayor, and I'm looking for this. Oh, here we are. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approves the City of Clarence and Rockland Cybersecurity Strategic Plan as recommended in Report IMIT-2019-006. Seconded by Councillor Bouchard. Go ahead, Mr. Cousineau. Yes, fine. Security a problem? Hold on. We'll see what Mr. Cousineau has to say about this. I believe you have a presentation, Mr. Cousineau. Yes? We're preparing it right now. If you wish, you can follow along in the scribed documents. Go ahead, Mr. Cousineau. Well, fine, Mr. Mayor. Well, Mr. Mayor and members of council, the purpose to approve a cybersecurity safety plan, given what we've heard and seen in the news quite recently, it's a reality that many private as well as public entities are prey to cybersecurity threats. Let me go through the presentation that supports the plan. That is an attachment to the report. Now, we'll go through this quickly. We'll determine why, what we're doing, when are we going to start, and I'm going to answer any questions you might have with regard to cybersecurity. Why do we do this? Well, as you can readily see on the first slide before you, companies such as Facebook, Equifax, Uber, Capital One, cities such as Baltimore, Atlanta, as well as the Nation Township have all fallen victim to cybersecurity attacks and lost, as a consequence, a lot of information, a lot of data, and incurred important costs for them to become operational again. So, if I'm allowed to continue, I'll say this. The reality is that pirates are motivated by money. Hackers once subscribed to the Robin Hood principle just to prove a point, but now they're completely motivated by money. They're associated to organized crime rings right now, and the purpose behind all of this is to bring an organization to its knees and have them pay. Smaller cities are becoming increasingly interesting targets because cyber pirates know that little cities or towns don't have as many cybersecurity safety tools as other major urban centers. Cybercrime gave rise to trillions of costs throughout the world each and every year. Anyone can become a hacker with an investment of $1 to $5 and a couple of hours invested in how to go about doing this. You can imagine an organized crime with sizable resources on hand. You can imagine the damage they can cause. Now, what we do have in Clarence Rockland is, well, what we do have are cyber security firewalls right now. We have antivirus software on all of our computers. We do a lot of great work to ensure that our network is kept safe, and we safeguard our data each and every year. We back it up. If something does happen, might not we might potentially look at a very small loss of data. But what we're doing right now is that we're implementing a strategic plan. And to give you an idea as to what we'll be doing in the next few years, not when we'll be implementing some phases, but what we're doing to ensure that we are investing our time and money adequately. Now we'll proceed to a thorough examination of our networks made by a third party. All cybersecurity auditors recommend that we do this. Let's not be afraid to take a step back and take a look at how different we can do things if we can. Now, those things that we've included in our strategic plan and the results stemming from the study commissioned that will be conducted by the third parties that will look into this will be implementing into a 3-year phase 1, 2, and 3 plan. We'll also be called upon to revise the plan on a regular basis each and every 6 months to make sure if it's still adequate. Have circumstances changed, and things change rather quickly when we talk about computers. Now, to do this, we've created what we call the cybersecurity framework plan for Clarence and Rockland, and we're targeting 4 aspects: policies and procedures, training and awareness, physical safety, and taking a look at systems per se. Historically, we only concentrate on the last part, and that's what the hackers count on, is that we strictly will concentrate on this solely. But these hackers will do things 100 times better than we can. They'll be certainly updated with regard to new cybercrime methods that can be implemented. This being said, we'll go forward and ensure that the town's assets are properly protected. Now, who's involved in all of this? Everyone is. It's not just an IT-related matter. Each individual, each member of town council, each town employee has a role to play to make sure that the town's data is kept secure. Now, what people will have as far as responsibilities go, well, number one, they'll receive training, Mr. Mayor. We'll implement a program calling for people to undertake training each and every year. We're not talking about, studying to obtain a doctorate in cybersecurity, but we're talking here about resources, easy tools that can be worked with by all town staff. And from an added value perspective, we want to offer cybersecurity courses 101 to the Clarence Rockland population at large to ensure that they have proper protection when they're navigating the internet. Those are information sessions lasting approximately 1 to 2 hours that we're looking into offering to the population at large in the coming weeks and months. Now, to cap off my brief presentation concerning this cybersecurity aspect of things, we want to make sure that we can control our resources to ensure that cyber pirates will not be able to control our systems. We're controlling our training, our investment, our procedures, and our policies. But there is no measure that can be taken that will safeguard us from any type of attack. Unfortunately, this is the reality that we're called upon to live with each and every day. That's all I had to say, Mr. Mayor. Well, I believe that you have a $30,000 budget for cybersecurity that's set aside. Any other questions? Yes, I do have a question, Mr. Mayor.
How much needs to be invested? Like, how do you come to that conclusion that 30's a good start to keep us safe, even though we know that we might not be safe
Yeah.
as well, right?
So 30 is a number to get us started.
Okay.
So 30 is, we're talking about having that third-party assessment. We're talking about stuff that we know we can do right away in the next 6 to 7 months that will help. However, in the detailed plan, it says that from here to the end of October and into November, we're going to be tightening up that detailed plan that said, all right, so as a result of that vulnerability assessment, their report will usually say, you have these 23 deficiencies you need to look at. So 6 of them are critical. Well, those will be the priorities. And the reality is, to fix those could be costly. This is when we do a risk management assessment saying, okay, maybe for a certain city, it may be worth doing that particular investment. Talking to other cities, talking to other partners, is it really worth it for us to do that investment? Becomes a risk management discussion of what we do and when. Right now, that $30,000 is purely just to get us started and to do a few initiatives that'll help us plan the rest of the 3 years, as well as get some immediate wins.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, if we are well organized, honestly, if I take a look at what we're doing, I'm confident that we're heading in a proper direction. I believe that you've properly structured your presentation, and I have a lot of confidence in where we're heading. Thank you very much, Mr. Bouchard. Thank you. Thank you for your great presentation. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Cousineau. All those in favor? Carried then. Item 9.6, Development Charge Update. Whereas the city has initiated and completed master servicing studies to determine capital needs based on forecasted growth projections within the municipality, and whereas it is the city's intention to publish the draft development charge background study on the city's website on September the 18th, 2019, and whereas the city must have an approved development charge bylaw update by no later than February the 5th, 2020, and whereas staff has consulted with the development community with respect to the draft capital works program and associated residential as well as non-residential development charges, be it resolved that Council receive Report INF 2019-007 be received as information. Seconded by Councillor Levert. Questions? Councillor Grimard. Will there be any other meetings scheduled with developers? I take a look at Appendix 4 or Attachment number 4. Given your schedule here, I see that you have a public meeting scheduled. Pardon me? Do you want me to go in English with this? No, it's fine, it's fine. Yeah, okay, I'll go in English then.
I see the attachment, the schedule for all the dates to be passed, and I see a public meeting on October 25th, which we have to do. Is there going to be any more, I wouldn't say private, but more consultation with the developers with the new numbers? I know you've said you've had some in the past, but I'm sure once they find out the numbers, they'll probably want to discuss. And I don't see anywhere where we are scheduling a meeting with the developers after the numbers are released publicly.
Yeah, you're quite correct. There isn't anything scheduled, although when the DC background study is published, that's a consultation period. So people can look at that, whether it be developers or builders, and pass comment on what we've done. But I guess one of the points that I tried to emphasize in this report is the consultation that we've gone through, leading up to this point in time. We developed local standards that hadn't been present before, and I think we got a very positive response from the consultant for the development industry that it's a lot clearer than it's been before. It lays out who's responsible for what. Mm-hmm. But as well, after we presented our, I guess, a slide presentation back in June, we went out to the development community, and a lot of the builders, developers, and consultants that attended our regular annual meetings here, they would sign in, give their email addresses. So once council had seen that program, we sent that out, and we gave them a month's time to respond. I think it closed on the 23rd of August. And we got about 5 responses. Didn't get any comment, maybe surprisingly enough, but we didn't get any comment about the quantum of the charge or any of the projects. If anything, some of the comments we got was to add. Was to add a couple of projects, and we looked at those in relation to our local service standards that we were adopting, and we added some of those in. But
So they're okay with 24% increase in the residential
I don't
DCs?
have anything to point to the fact that they're not. I mean, I think we've been, you hear the word all the time, we've been very transparent. We've worked closely with the developers, and we made sure that we sent out the documents. So I don't think there's any surprises out there. Now, that's not to say that in this period that we're entering into now, that you won't get some requests and comments. But I think we've done everything we can to be open and transparent with the
No,
development.
I was not discussing transparency. I was more discussing like,
Yeah.
okay, they're okay with where we're going. They don't find it too high. It's not going to slow down the development, because we had that at the last time. We were able to compete with other cities, and it shows. Like the recent years have been extremely good. So now when I see 24% increase, and ultimately it's the client that ends up paying, but a part of it, a large part of it. So I just want to make sure we're on track with maintaining again the momentum of development we have in our city.
Go there.
So we're entering into a public consultation process at this point. So we chose tonight to bring you all the details of where, so you're up to date with the development charge study. On the 18th, all of the information will become public as the final draft report. And we are obligated under the Development Charge Act to notify all of our developers. Anybody who's asked the municipality a question or had any interest in development, they go on what we call an interested parties list, and we're obligated to share all of that information to make sure that they're aware of that. But as Mr. Darch has said, we've engaged the community, we've had good participation at the meetings, they're aware the charge is going up, and as Mr. Darch said, that it was surprising not having the feedback. So there's a public meeting coming up. They will all be invited to that public meeting and have that information.
Yeah. Thank you. That's all I have.
So on the 18th, it's not finalized,
No.
right? It's just here's where we
Draft.
plan on going, okay, and then getting the public consultation on it?
Over the next 60 days, and we receive comment
Okay.
from council and from the public.
By not having any comment about the increase, shouldn't we be worried that we didn't approach the right way to
Talk about it?
Okay, so what we did is we sent this out directly to all of the developers. And we've had them look at all the projects that are on here, had them look at all the charge increases that was a result of the projects that are on here. And so the only requests that we had was to consider additional projects and to add them into the DCs. So we have, based on the local service standards, so there are some projects that are DC eligible and some that aren't, and the ones that were added onto the project list. And so there's been no pushback or no developer that said that these projects shouldn't occur or that these projects don't make sense.
They want the projects.
Yeah, I think we also have to consider that, during the time that you were asking for feedback is right smack in the middle of construction season. So they're probably preoccupied as well with other things like building houses and building projects and stuff like that. Me, I'm a bit worried with a 24% increase on the residential side, a 35% increase on the non-residential side. When you see the comparators around us, where we have certain municipalities whose charge is literally a third of what we're going to be going with, apparently. And these municipalities, at least two of them have, well, three now, have a lot of commercial space to develop, industrial lands to develop. They're literally giving away those lots for peanuts because they want those people to come and invest in their communities. We don't have that option because we basically don't have any commercial industrial land to develop at this point. It's no secret our tax base or tax base for commercial is very low. We've talked about numerous times on trying to get that back to a more reasonable percentage to help our residential tax base. The last development charge we did in 2015, we increased the commercial side by 35%. We're increasing again by 35%. So how are we going to be able to attract businesses to develop into our city? And if you look just at ATG, who built last year, for them, it's almost $90,000 more in development charges just for that one building. So it's a huge cost for a city that is begging literally people to come in for commercial because we know that we need to have an increased tax base for that. So, and I see a lot of the projects that are on the development charge list where I think we need to really need to review that as a council and say, okay, well, do we really need all those projects? I mean, there's a few on there. We talked about a few of them lately. We talked about one tonight. So I mean, I think we need to have a conversation and look at those things. There's some things on there that I don't think we actually need. We should really reconsider. And so I'm hoping that the development committee is going to come to the table on the next meeting and say, okay, well, okay.
As far as the commercial, I must agree with Mr. Lalonde. We're complaining that we're at, what, 6% commercial taxes, and I don't think we're going to do anything to attract people if we raise development charges. Maybe there's a way of looking at what we can do about that, because we do want to bring commercial. We
had a meeting, was it in May or something like that, here, specifically asking for solutions to try to boost that kind of development. And now we're coming with 35% increase to the charge. I mean, we're saying something, but we're doing the opposite. So I think we need to review those projects.
Suzanne?
We are in a catch-22 because 40 years when all those sewers start to go, the price is going to be about 4 times what they are today to replace them. So we're going to have to invest and get some money now, because if we don't do it through certain development charges, well, then the residents are going to have to pay for it.
But you don't
renew. Then you're going to be in a different situation.
Those development charges won't be able to pay for these.
Yeah, you don't renew infrastructure with these.
Okay, well, you get what I'm trying to say, that with everything else that's going to be crumbling in the next 40 years. We went out and we were building massive developments. We have a responsibility. I understand that 26% is a lot. We have a responsibility.
It's 35.
Sorry, 35. We have a responsibility to make sure that the city is actually in a good condition in the next 40 years. We have that.
Yep.
We do have hard decisions to make. Station number 4.
Yeah.
On my list of priorities, right about here. Not that that fire protection is not important. Maybe we can look at buying the land and reserve it and building it when we think we're going to need it. But there's things like that we need to look at more closely. But it is a catch-22. You have to trust the fact that they're getting these numbers and they're not pulling them out of anywhere.
Yeah.
They're clearly pulling them out of where they need to be and where other municipalities, I assume, are lining themselves up for, because everyone is starting to realize what the cost is going to be in the next little while. So it's a tough position to be in. I'm glad I'm not a builder. When it comes time to what you were saying about the businesses, you can't force businesses to set up. Even prior to this jump, where are they now? We've got how many commercial spaces empty? It's not because things aren't working, it's just they're just not coming in. Hopefully, we're gonna have someone in place that's going to be able to drive that up. But we're in a really, really weird situation because we're trying to be here, we're still trying to get there.
Well, maybe we need to reassess where we should be
Absolutely.
and figure out, okay, what is a necessity versus a need or a want.
Yes, but
And-
every time we approve more developments, we have to actually pay to upgrade a sewer system, upgrade a water system. They all come hand in hand. So at some point, you're gonna have to figure out and go, are we building enough? Maybe we can actually just go, maybe we need to slow down a little to try to catch up on a couple other places. I don't have the answers. I'm just saying, at some point, we're gonna have to do some serious soul searching as to where we wanna be. Sorry, that was.
No, that's fine. But in a way, it's true, 35% seems high, and we are trying to get commercial businesses here, but we are caught in the catch where we're at 26,000 in population, and we've been told that at 35, 40,000, we will attract a lot more businesses. So we're sort of in the middle here in the catch. That's what I'm going to.
I just wanted to make an overall comment that the projects that are presented before you are intended there to support the future growth. We've seen a couple cases when ATG built where the infrastructure that was put in place was not robust enough to support them, and we have to cycle back. Fortunately, it wasn't our infrastructure other than the road, but the hydro and natural gas were not there to support the growth. So the infrastructure that's presented before you is there intended to support the growth. And as long as we want to keep growing, and maybe that's what you're referring to in terms of where we want to be, we have to put that infrastructure in
Well,
place.
when I look at, to Maro's point, about Station 4, first of all, the amount of $3 million to construct, when we have way more than that just with the fire stations we built this year. When you have a population of 25,000 right now, even if we double it in the next 40 years, and that's a big maybe because we still have no highway, and nowhere near in the future that's going to get fixed. So when you have a city the size of Clarence Rockland, which is basically the same size as Orleans, look at geographically, it's about 300 square kilometers. You have 5 fire stations for Orleans with a population of 125,000 people and a much larger commercial base than we do.
Well, it's very difficult to compare that because you've got full-time firefighters in those stations,
Yeah.
so it's
It's
not a comparable.
When you have to put yourself into a position where there's a fine line between public safety versus you want to ensure that, but you also want to be able to attract into the city and retain the ones you have. That's
Yeah. If we could just, we're talking about the development charges, and then we talked about the fire stations. Really, let's just stick to the point. I believe that you wanted to stick to a particular point, the commercial charges. We're all in agreement with that, but I believe that the economic development, we can work with that. So I'm sorry to step into this conversation. I just want to stick to the point we were at. Well, I believe that the city charges and the fire stations, they're all linked to a certain extent. As far as I'm concerned, it's quite applicable. If you take a look at attachment number 1, you see all of the equipment with regards to station number 4. We're talking about over and above $3 or $4 million worth, plus the equipment. You see, there are many items that are not considered in development charges, and that's the other variable, Mr. Mayor. Often, when some items are not included in development charges, this is municipal losses that the municipality does incur that is added on to taxes.
We're going to be having more
I think we should wait till we get more information from the public to see what the reaction is going to be. This has been presented as information. So let's wait and see what reaction we get. We'll find out when we get to the public meeting. And we'll see there. Right now, That's where you'll see what the reaction is. Madam Cole?
The treasurer has just pointed out to me that we should indicate that Station 4 is not accounted for in this charge. It's identified in what we call a post-planning period. So this particular charge is not going up because of the...
Well, the equipment is there on this 10-year plan.
No, for the station itself.
No, but, you know, if you buy the equipment, it's because you're gonna...
All those in favor receiving this bit of information? Fine, thank you. Item 10, any other items? Do you have any questions of department heads? Mr. Grimal, no. Mr. Zant, Councillor Cardarelli, Mr. Bouchard, yes, I do have a question for Mr. Roy. Now, and I'm sorry if I'm not all that familiar with all the bylaws that are in effect in municipality. Are there any measures that prevent heavier commercial trucks to make use of residential or tertiary roads in certain wards? The situation in ward number 4, if you take a look at Mandra, that has its close to Laurier, and Bonavista has its own little operational area. Instead of taking Laurier and Caron with its heaviest truck, that goes on Bonavista, Central, and Beaumont, where there are some groups of children waiting for school buses, and we have heavy trucks going by there with delivery equipment attached to them. I believe there are 2 problems with that. Number 1, the children's safety, of course, and number 2, this type of heavy trucks, you know, traveling on those roads while we're redoing Laurier and Caron more often than Belvedere Road, that is already in poor shape. If you're to have heavy trucks driving onto that surface, what I'm getting at is there something that prevents us, that allows us to put a stop to this situation, or is that a similar type situation in any other situations? Yes, it's a problem with other municipalities that we have something that's in effect, but unfortunately, it's not something that we have the authority to enforce. We're supposed to enter into a partnership with the Ontario Provincial Police, specifically with a situation that arose last week, for example, but we were not contacted. We tried to establish a partnership with one of our representatives, with one of their representatives, to try and prevent this type of situation, but I'll follow up on this, and because I recognize that this is a problem. Is it possible, let's say, if we start off with this company, just to follow up with them, with that particular company, to determine whether or not there's a possibility to ensure public safety and ensure that they make use of major arteries instead of tertiary roads? Just to continue on with what Mr. Bouchard has stated, we know how many companies in town do resort to heavy trucks So anyways, that would solve the problem. Mr. Simon? Well, the bylaw is written in such a way that we don't have complete authority over this. Mr. Mayor, I know that, but you know, given community partnership, or to foster community partnership, beforehand we had power to intervene, but we're asking the Ontario Provincial Police what their input is. All we need is to enter into an agreement with the Ontario Provincial Police. All right, the Ontario Provincial Police, that's fine. Any other comments? Mr. Levin? Yep, nope, I had nothing. Mr. Lalonde, I had a tiny question here, Mr. Mayor. Quite recently, we encountered complex situations involving a Rochon Street on Laundry Street. And I believe there's a bit of disconnect in between the bylaw enforcement department or the planning or zoning department. I don't know, I believe that people don't know exactly who should react, who should say what, who should take in hand and resolve certain situations. Now, that gives rise to a lot of uncertainty. asked the question to Eve and said, well, Andre, you should phone Chantal. And I phoned Chantal, and Chantal said, well, you have to phone up bowel enforcement. When we're trying to solve particular situations, there's a disconnect as to who is given to do what. When residents phone up to complain, they're redirected and redirected from one department to another. Can we determine if something can be done to avoid further confusion so that we can be more uniform in our intervention, in our response to residents' complaints? Since our discussion, we've already met with some departments to implement a follow-up system. It's a type of partnership we need to establish, again, if I might make use of the term partnership. If I target my department with regards to, let's say, zoning, where we're not as comfortable as the planning or the planning department would be, but it stands to reason that we're trying to take matters in hand and try at least to take the initial steps and to obtain necessary resources from other departments to foster better communication amongst departments and with the ratepayers also, quite specifically. So I think things should improve. I think that all departments ought to work better together, and they're starting to. And it's going to allow you to better manage your workload, because you lose a bit of time in determining, who's going to do that. Am I going to be doing that? Is another department called upon to do this? That's food for thought, because we'll always encounter similar type situations, difficult situations, such as the one I'm alluding to right now. Yes, we have to take a look at the big picture, of course. I'd also like to mention something about Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson is vacationing in Bahamas at present. Last week he was involved in the building of the hospital, and he's involved in building a school. He was chosen amongst team members, first team members, to ensure that there was drinking water. Mr. Wilson is a very well-respected asset. It's an asset to have a fire chief that's so much in demand and honored everywhere. I believe that he was facing another hurricane-type situation in the country that he's in right now, helping build infrastructure there. Of course, we're not the ones that control the weather. But if you're in a tent caught in the midst of a hurricane, you say, well, God help me out. So let's give credit to Mr. Wilson where credit is due, of course. He's doing very good work, and we're lucky to have him. So thank you. Adjournment is called at 9:22 p.m. Good evening, one and all, and we'll see you again next month. Fine.